All right, good morning, everybody. Hopefully you're seeing me on Facebook Live this morning, but I probably look a little different to you because we're trying a little bit of an experiment today. I'm going to see if I can make sure that we're connecting with you by checking out my Facebook Live. No, that's not going to work. So this morning we're trying something different on the technical side. Well, we're going to have a time together like we normally do for sort of spending some time reflecting. At the same time, we're using Zoom today to do a live interview with Martin Morley now that he's back from sabbatical. So it's going to be an experiment in technology that hopefully you will get to experience. It'll be a little different for Martin and I because we're trying to navigate some of the technology that makes this possible. But hopefully it's a good experience for you. And it's another way in which we can provide content that's not just me all the time talking at you, but possibly coming together with other people and using some of their thoughtful and spiritual insights to help guide us along the way. So that's what we're hoping for this morning. So as you get on board, as always, shout out to each other and make this a way in which we all connect to each other. It's obviously important for us to feel like we're connected, obviously not only to the earth that in these particular days feels like it's under a lot of strain, particularly in California, but how do we continue to nurture and nourish our relationship to planet, but also our relationship to not only the family that we get to spend time with, but our extended family to people that we're unable to spend time with physically. This is one of the ways we could do that, is just to simply connect on a Sunday morning and know that we've tethered our spiritual journeys together in a meaningful way. So welcome. I'm glad you're here. For the theme today, I want to kind of build on some of the work that we've been doing on a Sunday morning to think about what does it take to kind of function as spiritually in our time, right? What are the sort of spiritual resources that we tap into as we try to think about our place in the context of the kind of global pandemic that we're facing and all those requirements, but also all of the kind of societal components that have been either revealed as we've been in this time together, some of the challenges that we face collectively, the challenges that we face personally, what's going on inside of us, even relationally, as we're spending more time with kind of our intimate partnerships. All of those require a capacity to reach into the depth of our own souls. And we've talked about, so what's needed when we do that? Certainly, we've talked about the ability to tap into our historic spiritual roots, whatever they happen to be. If you happen to be somebody who's linked to Christianity or another religious tradition or stories from our past, we want to make sure we hold on or have a link to those. We've talked about that. We've talked about this capacity to tap into kind of an inner courage, to have the courage to be, as Paul Tillich says. But today I want to think about how we tap into the call for creativity. And I bring that up for a couple of reasons. One is that this last week, as part of the educational system and part of our own family life, Lori registered for us to participate in a week-long teach-in on anti-racist teach-in. And it was hosted by Ibram X. Kendi, one of the authors of books about racism. And so every night we would sit down and listen to lectures on how we can move forward as a community to be anti-racist. And at first I thought, I don't consider myself a racist, so I don't know that I'm the problem, but I do participate in systemic racism. And so Ibram challenges us to think, and this is the creative part, right? To begin to think, not that, hey, I'm not a racist. I mean, that's easy to say, but how do I become an anti-racist? How do I live into being an anti-racist, one who is actively working towards a different kind of society, not just stepping aside and saying, well, I'm I'm clearly working on my own issues around racism. I don't consider myself a racist. That's the easy way out. And as he interviewed various people throughout the week, I was just impressed with the degree of creativity that was required to deal with this issue. And I'm going to talk about some of the options for you in our announcement time today. But clearly, when we're thinking about moving into the future and crafting a new future together, this capacity for creativity of folding in story and poetry and the arts and our own internal muse that allows us to maybe paint a different picture for ourselves. That call for creativity is definitely there. For those of you who maybe tapped into the Democratic National Convention, which took place digitally this last week, and I too watched that every night, I was impressed at the this capacity not only to talk about policy, but to be creative about painting what's required for a new future. That, like Kamala Harris, calling us to think about what it means to be the beloved community. Right? She's tapping into almost religious, spiritual metaphors to ignite the creativity of a people so that we might reimagine our future together. Even Joe Biden, as he tries to run for the presidency here, using imagery and not only stories, personal stories, not only policy platforms, but this wave of creativity that had a deeply religious tone to it, right? What does it mean to strengthen the soul of America? Painting his platform in terms that were just not technical, but were filled with imagination, hope, possibility. Last week, as we talked, I got a few emails sent back to me, people creatively exploring what it meant for them to integrate hope into their own lives. One of our own parishioners was struggling at home as they had a garden in their backyard for a long time, but the position of the garden made it impossible to garden anymore. And as they aged, I think it became more and more difficult for them to do that. And so as a couple, they had to work together to reimagine how they might integrate their relationship to the soil back into their lives. And the woman in the partnership got more involved this time, and she wrote a beautiful piece reflecting on kind of how they creatively reintegrated gardening back into their lives, even though they thought it might be lost to them. And I just want to read the kind of a last line of the paragraph of reflection she had on that process. She wrote this: "I never imagined that a garden could become such a major part of my life. This was always my husband's territory, and I was only the observer. But when I saw how dispirited he was at the possibility of giving up this beloved garden, I decided there had to be a way to make this work. The vegetable garden in our backyard has become this perfect answer for us. Now, as I begin my morning, a one-sided conversation with my roses, with my tomatoes, the squash, and the cucumbers, I tell them how grateful I am that they have welcomed me into their world. As the reality of the sequester has unfolded, the seeds I planted gave me a tomorrow. The garden filled me with anticipation and hope." I love that line. The seeds I planted, they gave me a tomorrow. When you think about what it means to be creative, maybe think about them as the seeds that you plant the seeds you plant that might give all of us a new tomorrow. Like the old parable of the sower, who goes about casting seeds out into the rough soil, longing potentially for a sixfold return on the work that the sower is putting into the process of scattering seeds amongst land that is arid and dry and may not produce a return, hoping that something might grow. And if you remember that old parable in Mark's gospel that we've just studied this last week, the promise is that there will be return, not just sixfold, but tenfold, 100-fold, 1,000-fold, that as we plant these seeds of creativity, in a sense, there will be a return that creates a new possibility for family, for personhood, for community, for world. As Christians and as spiritual people, we should be the ones who can risk being creative together. And so what does that look like? So today I'm going to invite Martin Morley into that conversation. And in a moment, I'll bring Martin onto the screen. Martin has obviously taken part of his sabbatical to do some creative work. And so I'm going to welcome Martin to our time together. I'm going to unmute him. He's been hiding in the background, and have him talk a little bit about his process of kind of engaging in the creative process of working on an artistic piece. So Martin, are you there?
I'm here, Dan.
Oh, fantastic. We were laughing because Martin and I, before we got started this morning, spent about 15 minutes trying to work the technological side of this. And oh my gosh, it's working swimmingly at this point. So Martin, welcome back from sabbatical. It is good to have you, and welcome to Facebook Live. It's awesome to do it alongside of a partner and not just by myself. So I'm glad you're with us this morning for the journey.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Yep. You just got back from sabbatical, and I think maybe the first thing you could talk to people about a little bit is, what was kind of the project that you integrated into that sabbatical, just to have folks kind of hear what you were working on as you took that. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about that, and then I have some questions about the process that you undertook.
Okay. Well, way back when I was in college, I wrote a cantata for my choir in Kansas to sing. And cantata, of course, is a piece for singers, a choir, and I wrote it with piano accompaniment. That was then, and I'd never really completed it because I wrote out the choral parts so the choir could sing it, but I never wrote out the accompaniment because, well, I was at the piano and I was the composer and I knew what to do. So last fall, one of the members of that Kansas choir got in touch with me, and she was asking about the cantata, and I thought, I wonder if that has stood up over time. So I dug it out. It's a cantata for the Advent season, 4 weeks before Christmas, and it's called Prepare the Way. Fashioned after the words of John the Baptist, prepare the way of the Lord. And so I looked at it and I thought, this could be improved. So I updated the lyrics and I changed some of the choral parts, but the main project was to write down the accompaniment. It's a lot of notes and it's a tedious process. And I needed to figure out, okay, what is the final form that I want for this? I can't just improvise it every time I play it. So I wrote down the accompaniment. The cantata is in 6 parts. And I can tell you a little bit more about each of the parts. The first part is the prologue, and it deals with the people's desire for a Messiah. It starts with the opening of Psalm 13, which is a psalm of lament, and the words are, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? Then it moves into Isaiah 40, which is God's promise to comfort God's people. So that's the first part. The second part is really the theme of the whole thing. It starts with John the Baptist saying, "In the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord." There's a little more Isaiah, and that's the second part. The third part is intentionally comical. There are some stories in the Bible that are just hilarious, and I think this is one of them. This is the encounter between the angel Gabriel and the old priest Zechariah.
Yeah.
Where Gabriel tells Zechariah that he and his elderly wife Elizabeth are going to have a child, and that child will grow up to be the person we now call John the Baptist. Well, Gabriel sings this prophecy to Zechariah, and Zechariah each time sings a duet with Gabriel saying, "I can't believe it, it's not going to happen." Well, this happens twice, and then the third time Gabriel says, "Well, since you haven't believed me, you are going to have to be silent until this baby is born." The third time we hear the duet between Gabriel and Zechariah, one part is missing. And it's Zechariah's part because he can't speak anymore.
That's good.
A women's chorus comes in and sums it all up by saying, "Zechariah soon will have feelings of regret. This will be a pregnancy he won't forget." So that's the third part.
Yeah.
The fourth part is intended to be a contrast to the third part because the angel Gabriel visits Mary as well. This is all in the book of Luke. And when Gabriel tells Mary that she's going to be the mother of the Messiah, she's absolutely on board with it. Says, let's make it happen. And so the fourth part of the cantata is the Song of Mary in the book of Luke that begins with, "My soul magnifies the Lord." And the choir backs up Mary with some choral singing, but it's mostly just a solo for a soprano.
Yeah.
The fifth part of the cantata is a prayer to God to help us prepare for what is coming, for the gift of Jesus and what it means in our lives. And then there's the last part, the epilogue of the cantata, which begins with, "In the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord," just as we heard it in the second movement. Mm-hmm. Then there's a little bit of the prayer from the fifth movement. And then we move into those great words from the 9th chapter of Isaiah, "For unto us a child is born, a son is given," and it builds and builds to the great names for Jesus: Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God,
yeah.
Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And then we hear one more statement of, "In the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord," and boom, it's done.
Wow. That's quite how long is that thing?
It lasts about 23 minutes.
Oh, still, that's lovely. Wow, good for you. So it sounds like you had some of the material from prior that you were trying to upgrade the language and that sort of stuff. And then it sounded like a kind of a technical challenge to just get everything on paper. Sounds like that was part of it too. So maybe my questions are going to be both about what you experienced during the sabbatical and maybe reaching back to when you originally did it. And that is when you approach a project you're trying to birth something out of that which doesn't exist at this point. So you're in the creative process. Kind of how do you get yourself into that space for the work of creativity? What are some of the things you do that allow you to be present for that sort of creative side of yourself when you enter a project like this?
Well, as a musician, I think musically. And when I hear text or poetry that is inspiring to me, it's not hard to imagine that set to music. So I have to have a text that really inspires me. So I used some of my favorite biblical texts. In this cantata, it's mostly from Isaiah, my favorite prophet, and from Luke, my favorite gospel.
Interesting. So what I'm hearing you say is that part of it is gathering around yourself that which inspires you.
Exactly.
So it's not as if you're trying to generate the inspiration, you're tapping into that which already kind of inspires something inside of you or pulls something out of you in a kind of a creative way. Is that the case?
That's exactly the case. And it can be scripture or it can be poetry in general.
Yeah. And then so how do you talk about how you live in relationship to that which inspires you? How do you nurture that relationship, but so that you get to the point where you're actually generating something out of that inspiration? How does that work for you?
Well, I
And I
think
should, just
it
before you
was,
answer it, I should note that Martin doesn't really know the questions I'm asking you.
yeah, we're
So,
winging it here, folks.
yeah, exactly. This is really like real time. Okay, so sorry. So how the relationship you have with the inspirational content, and I'm asking you that because I'm expecting that if we're challenging each other to be creative, we have to think about, well, then if this is a journey to creativity, how might I do that with the stuff that inspires me? So that's sort of why I'm asking you that question.
Well, I wish I had a more interesting answer to that, but I think it was Einstein who said that it's 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. And that's it. You know, you have this inspiration that's the spark of everything, but then you've got to have the will to carry it through and do the work. And the inspiration has to be strong enough so that it lasts through all the perspiration.
Yeah, that's a great insight, I think, Martin. Just that, so in a sense that sometimes we think that creativity is like this explosion in and of itself, like it generates the work itself. But what I'm hearing you say is it requires a certain discipline of work in order for the harmonization of the inspiration and the that which you create comes to being. That it's a partnership between really working hard at it and allowing it space inside of yourself. So, and how, maybe, so that's a good question. How that, for that small 1% to stay present for you, do you revisit the text? Do you, what keeps the spark from going out when you're working hard at the, all the, just the labor of generating something creative?
Well, for me, it's important to work a little bit and then reflect on what I've put down on paper or conceived in my mind. And even though there has to be that initial spark of inspiration, in retrospect, after I've done some of the work, I can see that the inspiration was there all along, and it was plenty, even if it's just 1%, it was plenty to carry me through. So for me, as I work, especially on something that's as extended as this, a 23-minute cantata,
Yeah.
I have to stop along the way and review what I've done, and then that inspires me again.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that was one of my questions that I had for you, and that is, at what point, or how do you know when the body that you're starting to create, the body of work you're starting to create, and this for all of us, right? This could be whatever it is you're creating, starts to take on some like a life of its own, or starts to inform the ongoing work, so that it might start with a spark. You enter into the work of the matter, but then it becomes almost like, from my perspective, it seems like it becomes more like a relationship. Like the work itself is has some generative power in the process. Is that what you're describing when you go back and revisit the content, and then it reignites itself in a sense, or has a role to play in where you go next?
Definitely. And I think any creative person needs that reignition of the inspiration as they go along. So sometimes I'll just do a couple of lines of music, and then I'll stop and I'll say, let's go back over that and see whether I like it, whether I still like it after having written it.
Yeah.
And yeah, that works for me.
Yeah. I think when I listening to all the anti-racist stuff that I've been listening to this last week, what you're saying really resonates, because the work that's required to kind of educate yourself out from this sort of passion to say, you know what, rather than just saying I'm not a racist anymore, I want to be an anti-racist. I want to actually do something that reduces the footprint of racism in society and in my own flesh and blood. You sort of have to stumble and try stuff, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work, and then you have to be able to look back on it and say, is that really connected to what I'm trying to do here? Am I creating a new way forward for myself? How does that feel? And then take another couple of steps, then try it again, going back. It's almost like a dialogue with that which is inspiring you. Would you say that as like a conversation that you have with it, with the?
I think that's a great
most part.
analogy because it's just like our progress toward eliminating racism. You take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and
Yeah,
they're all baby steps.
yeah,
They're
yeah,
all baby steps.
yeah.
But
Has there been moments when you've taken a step and you've gone back and then you're like, no, that you've actually said that was that not a misstep, but that doesn't capture the essence of that spark, and so you kind of let it go or or rework it? How does that work when you have to go back?
absolutely.
Hmm.
Sometimes, with our best intentions, I don't know how it is for every creative person, but for me, it's sometimes you'll write something, and when you go back, you realize that really doesn't work. And
Yeah,
it wasn't a mistake on your part. It was just a matter of that's not where the inspiration is really taking me. So, yeah, I think that's a great analogy.
yeah,
Sometimes a misstep just means that you need to try again.
yeah. And I think it goes back to the why it has to be so conversational, right? You have to keep having a conversation with the original spark, like you were describing, and then seeing how that is being manifested in the work you're doing. And then, is that resonating? Is it got the right harmony that you're looking for? And then maybe having to retool it if that's the case, but you're always in that kind of conversation with that spark.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Have you noticed along the way, so when you're in the creative process, either of writing lyrics that are driven by some of your, the stuff that kind of lights up your world, and you're trying to put it to new language for a piece like this, or even in the writing of the melody, are there some moments of surprise that happen for you along the way that make you go, oh, I did not see that coming? So how does kind of the magic of surprise fit into this whole process?
Well, the surprises are always there. That's a great question. And sometimes it's a good surprise, and sometimes it's a not so good surprise. Um, but yes, absolutely. There are things that I didn't see coming and that I'm glad came because they informed the process, and it wasn't something I could have done just um, on my own. I feel that
Mhm.
there is inspiration coming from somewhere else.
That's interesting. And do you find that it's always that the surprises come solely out from the process you're in with the content, or do surprises come from other quarters, so to speak? A conversation over a cup of coffee with a friend, or, like out from the blue, something comes into this process because you're so focused on the process. Do you notice that happening in any way as you engage in this kind of work?
I think it does come from a singularity of focus on what I'm doing. I don't generally talk about the composition process over coffee with a friend.
Okay.
It's a very personal thing for me.
Well, that's interesting. So for you, most of it, and you're an introvert, so let's get that on the table.
Yep,
Um,
just like you, Dan.
yeah, exactly. So for you, that conversation is more of it going on inside.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and then that leads me to my next question. So if it is an inside process for you, how do you think it gives? How does it build the complexity of your own sense of soul, or your own sense of who Martin's, kind of Martin's spirituality, Martin's religious character? Does this kind of work, especially tethered to religious content like you're doing, um, how does it mature or change or affect sort of the landscape of your own sense of soul or your own sense of your religious experience?
Well, sometimes we don't know what we think until we actually say it out loud.
Mm,
And it's the same way for me and writing music, that I don't know really what want to say musically until I've actually played it or written it down. And then I think, yeah, that's what I wanted to say all along. I just didn't have the words for it yet.
mm, mm. That's interesting. So it allows your soul voice, is what I'm hearing you say in some ways.
I think that's a good way to put it. Sure.
Yeah, yeah. And what's that like for you when you hear you know, it's one thing when it's an inside conversation, but when the voice that's coming out of you becomes such a public expression, right? You're asking people to stand there and mouth the words that have been birthed out from your creative process. That's got to be quite a moment. What happens in that moment for you?
Well, it's a great moment because it's the fulfillment of something that was my goal all along, is to communicate something to people and to hear how it actually sounds outside of my head.
Yeah.
I don't have any children, but I have a feeling it's sort of like releasing your children into the world and seeing that they've become really good people.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor. I think that's a perfect parallel, actually. I mean, you have spent so much time nurturing, you know, the origins of the spark that was inside of you, the discipline it took, which is just like child rearing, and then you get to see that manifested publicly, and you, in a sense, if it's anything like children, at some point you lose control of it. It becomes a thing in and of itself, right? It is a thing, or she is a person, or he is a person, you know, and you were just part of bringing that to life. And then you kind of get to step back and go, look at that. What a beautiful thing.
That's it.
Yeah. All right. Last question for you here. Hopefully everybody's enjoying this. I'm certainly enjoying it. So thanks, Martin, for chilling out this morning. Last question is sort of what, you know, at some point you're going to release this in the world. For this piece in particular, the cantata, what's your hope for it as it lands in a community? Maybe it's our community at some point, maybe it's another community that is able to engage this piece. My sense is that there is something inside of the way in which you constructed it that you're hoping holds some either message or inspiration or something that connects people in a new way to the season of Advent. What's your hope for this piece as you long for its arrival in the public realm?
My initial hope is that singers, choral singers, will be able to sing again.
Yes.
I mean, you know, the times that we're in, that there's some doubt about that.
Yeah.
But my initial goal is that our own choirs would be able to sing it at our Christmas concert in 2021. Of course, it would be nice to get it published. It's really hard to get things published when you're not an already established composer, because publishing houses are like Hollywood. They find out what sells and then they want more of it. And you get sequels and you get a lot of the same stuff. So it's hard to break into the publishing world, but I'm going to try it. I'm going to send it to publishers.
Oh, good for you. Good for you. But at least you've got the beauty of, if we are all singing together at some point, you've got a built-in community that you can entrust this creative work to, that can bring it to life more fully. And then obviously people in the pew experiencing it and enjoying it as they kind of enter into an Advent season. I'm not sure if it's folded into the worship experience, but my guess is, like a sermon, you're trying to also kind of invite people into the experience of Advent that awakens that kind of moment, that liturgical or that seasonal moment for them in a new way.
That's right. That's my goal, my intention.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, thanks, Martin, for kind of spending time with us. Hopefully, as you listen to this, and certainly for me, and I know this is a bit selfish, but you're not only listening to Martin's story, talking about how he's kind of helped this come to life by the creative work he's used to kind of engage it, but I want you to be able to think about, how do you tap into your creativity, right? How do you nurture the sparks that have to be sparking in times like this? I think when things are kind of pressurized like they are, just like we think about what's going to happen tonight, when things are pressurized, right, sparks happen. So when sparks happen for you, don't just let them die into quiet ember, but nurture and pay attention to them in a way that allows you some access to your own creative journey as well. Okay. All right, Martin, I'm gonna get rid of you.
Goodbye, everybody.
Yes,
Happy
thank
Sunday
you.
Morning.
Big applause for Martin. It's good to have you back, Martin, and I really do appreciate you joining in on this call. Just as a side note, because we have this capacity now to do more conversational style Sunday mornings, I'm sure you'll see more of Martin as well. So that's a good thing. All right. See you, Martin.
Bye.
All right. I'm having technical difficulties now all of a sudden. Hold on. Okay. Whew, man. We're back. Sorry about that disruption. So I just wanted to finish up today. I know it's this is a new format. So for me, it was hard to be like, I want to be present for you on a Sunday morning. Obviously, that's one of my goals, but and I want you to be present for each other. But I also want to make sure that we figure out a way to kind of wrap this up in a meaningful way. My wife is texting me because she's watching the video and it's a 20-second delay. So she's not realizing that we're back. I want to go back to the story of the parable of the sower, which is a very creative way in which obviously I think Jesus, as he tried to think about how do we bring about a kind of a new world order inside of the chaos that was his experience in his cultural context. And this capacity to think about, look, creativity means that it's like seed scattering, right? We're not going to all get it right. Not all seed is going to take root and grow, but we trust that this sort of capacity to cast the seeds of hope or the seeds of love, or as the reference to this story, I think it's back in Isaiah, says these sacred seeds that have capacity, right, to create something new for us individually and for us collectively. We have to be about the work at keeping to spread those seeds. And so as you think about what kind of inner spark is within you, and you think about the work you want to bring to this process, my hope is today that just listening to Martin and the way in which he reflected is kind of an inspiration to you to say, I need to put in the hard work of partnering with the spark of insight or what's kind of under my skin right now that's brewing. I need to partner with that, the work it takes to see what happens if it starts to come to life a little bit more fully. And then to reflect on it and say, is this the kind of life that I want to be leaning into? Wouldn't that be an awesome kind of way in which we frame our collective journey together, to hear from each other the way each creative muse is manifesting itself in the lives that we're living? What an awesome experience that would be. Maybe church, as we start to move forward, can look a little bit more like that. All right. Just a couple of announcements today before we send you on your way. Let's see if I can find my announcement page here. Just a note that on September 20th, which is coming up around the corner, is sort of our digital fall launch. And so by the 20th, we're hoping to have a wider network of touch points for you that allow you to participate in this kind of spiritual journey that we're on together. So watch for that. There'll be information about that coming to you. One of those pieces that is being driven by the Sierra Pacific Synod and the ELCA is a call to really think about how do we form church communities that are really working hard at becoming anti-racist. And one of those projects I'm going to be working on this week, and I'm just going to plant the seeds of invitation, is a journey that the Sierra Pacific Synod is inviting communities to go on together in groups of 12 to create a small conversational circle for about 8 sessions that just reflects on this theme and tries to plant the seeds of kind of anti-racist communities throughout our synod and throughout our nation. just like we did with the RIC process, it's early steps to say, can churches be those places where you can go to work on not just saying, I'm not a racist, but to lean in and say, I am actively becoming an anti-racist in our society. And I'm sure in those conversations, we'll talk, why is that so important at this point in time in human history, literally? It is a step that we will be required to take that's going to require a spark of insight and creativity and the hard work and the stumbling and the revisiting of trying to find our way into a more just and equitable society and world. A conversation that I think will lead to the further conversation of how we do that in our environmental lives as well. So if you're interested in that, I'm just looking for 12 people. If I can get 12 people, we might try a circle and see how that works, and then see if we can carry that forward even in years ahead. So that's something to think about if you're interested. Also, just a note that our financial reports will get posted up in this week. That's coming out on Thursday of this coming week. And I've just got to tell you that even despite having to do church with this kind of weird distancing thing, you have been so gracious in continuing to find ways to donate to the community. We have lost a lot of our revenue because of our site usage. Obviously we've pretty much closed the site down, but our sustaining folk who are partnering with us in this journey have continued to be financially supportive of the work that we do. And that is just deeply appreciated. So keep it going, but my gratitude for all of you who continue to support this journey that we're on financially. It's awesome. So thank you for that. You'll see a good, favorable financial report coming your way. And then finally, for those of you who want to jump into the Mark study, I know that we're sort of getting deep into Mark. I think we're going to be in Mark chapter 4 or 5. I've just started to post summaries of the lessons on the YouTube channel. And so if you want to catch up, I'm going to try to keep posting kind of summary videos, short ones, just so you could quick kind of catch up and see where we are. And if you'd want to jump in on a Wednesday at 11:30, you can do that. If that's a bad time for you, of course, you can just watch the summaries. And Martin is working on a education piece that will happen on Monday nights. So you could get in on that coming up here pretty soon. So anyway, a lot going on. Thanks for being a part of today in this new experiment. I'm going to see if I can stop streaming to Facebook, which is another technical thing I got to do. And I will see you soon, clearly next week, as we join together for Facebook Live on a Sunday morning. Take care, everybody.